Fight Club is a movie that promotes violence, masculinity, aggression, and anarchy. Or at least that's what Tyler Durden, a well-known symbol of the manosphere, would want you to think. Actually, though, this interpretation couldn't be any further from the truth. Fight Club is about fighting, yes, but it's about fighting against all-powerful, greedy institutions and the structures that uphold them. It's about standing up to groupthink. It's about pushing back against consumerist and materialist tendencies, instead finding what it is that you really want to define you and your life. But most of all, it's about acknowledging that all of us, yes, even boys and men, have a feminine side. Let me explain.
With insomnia, nothing's real. Everything's far away.
For simplicity's sake, I'll refer to the narrator as Jack. In reality, though, he has no name. His only identity is to be found in his furniture and other possessions. He has no personality either. He's just another drone amongst the swaths of people who have lost themselves to capitalism, consumerism, and materialism. His sole purpose is to add to his halfway decent wardrobe and nearly complete furniture collection. In short, his life can be chalked up to working a job he hates so that he can spend money on things he doesn't really want, which forces him to continue working the job he hates so he can buy even more stuff he doesn't really want. In this way, he's a victim of the society Tyler describes.
Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
This is important because it's proof that Jack has surrendered his power of choice completely over to the discretion of the greater society, which is evident when Tyler, who is really a part of Jack, shares his story. It's for this reason, not for anything else, that he's become emasculated, powerless, because he's willingly given his freedom of choice away. Society makes it hard, without a doubt, but you always have a choice. There's always a way to start carving out your own path, no matter how slow, no matter how difficult. But Jack didn't do this. He chose the easy route, the path of convention, the one that allowed him to do the least amount of thinking, feeling, and reflecting, and the fact of the matter is that a lot of us are like that too. We prefer convenience over freedom, a false sense of security over creating and achieving the life we really desire. It's also for this reason that Jack is drowning in the pointlessness of it all. His life has become humdrum and monotone, and as a result of this, he suffers from insomnia. At any given moment of the day, he feels half asleep and half awake, half conscious, half unconscious, half alive, half dead. He's stuck between wanting agency and power and not having them. He knows what he's missing, but he doesn't know how to get it. Metaphorically, Jack can be seen as representing the underactive side of the wounded masculine. He lacks conviction, confidence, and action. He's unassertive, and he seems to be sexually repressed. This is where Tyler comes in. When Jack meets him, he comes off as a highly charismatic, highly confident, highly attractive man. This is what draws Jack to him. He's everything he's not, everything he wishes he could be.
I look like you want to look, I fuck like you want to fuck, I am smart, capable, and most importantly, I'm free in all the ways that you are not.
What's more, he hates and actively renounces all that plagues and traps Jack. Consumerism, materialism, capitalism, and all that they represent and create. This is why he chooses to live in a dilapidated house and why he chose credit card companies as his target. As we got to know Tyler better, though, we're slowly shown his more negative aspects. We're shown how once he sees even the slightest glimpse of power, he instantly thirsts for more. Through a mix of spiritual jargon, emotional appeal, and oversimplifications of history, he convinces his followers to do his bidding, to dismantle the powers that he's identified as destructive and oppressive. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that he was wrong with who and what he targeted. I'm just pointing to the fact that everyone in Project Mayhem, except Jack, ultimately ends up doing what Tyler wants, not what they want or think is correct.
Sooner or later, we all became what Tyler wanted us to be.
So in breaking down the old constructs that were keeping the Fight Club members enslaved, subservient, and lost, he creates an equally, if not more domineering and chastising empire of sorts. Ultimately, for reasons that I hope are now clear, Tyler represents the overactive side of the wounded masculine. He has confidence, charisma, strength, and agency, but he's also aggressive, overly dominant, has an overwhelming need for control, and completely ignores emotion. Together, Jack and Tyler represent not only the whole spectrum of the wounded masculine, but also the attitudes, philosophies, and psyches of our most recent generations of boys and men.
Still men.
Yes, we're men. Men is what we are.
Although a smaller role, Bob plays an important part in developing the plot. Since he's a former pro wrestler who's lost his testicles, has female-like breasts, and a higher-pitched voice following the overuse and abuse of steroids, for me, Bob is an example of the unexpected and undesirable consequences that taking anything to the extreme can have. In this case, he developed traditionally feminine traits because of his pursuit to be ultra-masculine. He's also the one who, during a support group meeting, encourages Jack to cry and open up emotionally without fear of judgment, which Jack finds allows him to sleep like a baby.
Babies don't sleep this well.
This is interesting because when Bob sees Jack on the street one day, he tells him that he's also stopped going to the meetings because he's now got something so much better, aka Fight Club. While doing research for this video, I found a post on Reddit that argued that this line illustrates the transformative impact of addressing repressed needs through action rather than the mainstream approach of discussing issues in traditional group therapies. I agree with this on some level, but on the whole, I think it's too black and white. Claiming that Fight Club allows Bob and others to address repressed needs makes it sound like men need to be allowed to be violent in order to feel enfranchised and whole. I disagree. I'm a woman, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think men need is to feel like they can express themselves as they naturally wish to do so, without being judged or being told they're too masculine, feminine, or otherwise. The problem is that society always tells us how to behave, what to buy, how to look, how to think, what to aspire to the point that you end up subjugating yourself, forgetting entirely what it is you want, how it is you feel, or how to express your feelings, much less recognize them. More on this later on in the conclusion, but for now I wanted to read an excerpt from a website I came across that I think explains this nicely. The manosphere's affinity for Fight Club stems from a common, central, biologically deterministic claim. Men are naturally predisposed to being violent, dominant hunter-gatherers who, having found themselves domesticated by modern civilization, are now in a state of crisis. The problem in their logic comes when they want to strip away the consumerist programming Fight Club is so against and replace it with more programming in the form of old-fashioned generals, destructive characters of masculinity, and patriarchal privilege. In other words, they're a bunch of rule followers trying to remake the world in the way they've always been told it should be. The entire point of Project Mayhem, like was stated in the quote I just finished reading, was to push back against the capitalist iron fist. It was to actively do things that showed that consumerism, materialism, status, and societal expectations in general do not matter. Unfortunately, with Tyler at the helm, what initially might have been a positive movement pretty quickly devolved into utter chaos and destruction. This is what happens when pure, unadulterated, unrestrained, toxic masculinity comes into power. The traits that were before only exhibited by the individual infect the masses. Additionally, in a sad but expected turn of events, the violence isn't only projected outwardly onto the society they claim to critique and abhor, it's inflicted onto them as well, not only in the form of physical violence, which Tyler enthusiastically allows to become more and more brutalizing and uncontrolled, but also in more insidious forms of violence like emotional and verbal manipulation, deceit, erasure of identities, gaslighting, insults, threats, exploitation, lack of empathy, and the list goes on. These forms of violence are common to cults, but more on that in another video. For the purposes of this video, it's just important to acknowledge that by being so overly dominant and masculine, Tyler ultimately ends up emasculating the very same people who came to him looking to be more masculine. This is a direct echo of what happened to Bob, since, as you'll recall, he began developing more feminine traits in an attempt to be ultra-masculine. Ultimately, the point is that you'll never healthily embody masculinity if you always look outwards for direction and clarity. You always just end up doing what someone else wants you to do, which is the opposite of agency, power, and control, and is therefore the opposite of masculinity. Notice it's not femininity like most people think, which brings me to one of the most important characters in the movie, Marla.
The big tourist. Her lie reflected my lie. And suddenly, I felt nothing.
For almost the entirety of the movie, Marla seems out of place. Many people might think it's because of her personality, and many more might think it's because she's a woman in a man's world, to be precise. The fact that I left her for last might make it seem like I agree, but I actually don't think that at all. Rather, I think she only seems out of place because Jack, Tyler, and Project Mayhem were so insular for so much of the movie that she had no choice but to seem out of place. Similarly, it might seem like the movie was trying to argue that women have no place, or at least no place of importance, in this world. But I think it chose to portray Marla the way it did for a very specific reason: to critique how society actively interprets women and their role in life. This movie is all about its social commentary, after all. The things it seems to glorify, it's actually critiquing, and the things it seems to dismiss, it's actually promoting. Furthermore, I think Marla is meant to evoke the feminine. The wounded feminine, yes, but the feminine nonetheless. In this way, she represents all that Jack has a hard time being. She's vulnerable, authentic, emotional, raw, and maybe most importantly, unbothered by other people's opinions of her.
This is cancer, right?
In this way, she's critical to the movie and to Jack's character growth, because she's meant to bring balance to the excessive masculine energy that's present within both. Why then, you might be asking, can she so easily be confused as a negative presence in Jack's life? Why, exactly as Jack was beginning to get in touch with his more feminine aspects, did Marla's presence cause him to close himself off to his emotions again? It took me a while to understand this, but then it hit me. The reason is because before Marla came into the picture, he wasn't actually being vulnerable, emotional, raw, or unbothered by other people's opinions of him. He was just pretending to be. And sure, this might have been enough to finally give him some relief and let him sleep like a baby, but only because even faint authenticity is a relief to someone who's been fake for so long. To someone who's been so lost for so long that he doesn't even officially have a name, but rather the viewer has to dig between the clues and vestiges of his old life to try to find one. Jack. What Jack was actually doing was that he was being a liar and a leech who was taking advantage of the emotional support of people who were actually in a crisis and despair. All the while, he hid behind masks and walls that not only allowed him to avoid ever feeling too vulnerable, but also gave him a hand up over those who bared themselves fully by sharing their biggest pains and struggles and tying their identities to them. It was dishonesty at its worst. So of course Marla's presence caused him to become self-conscious, because since she just is what she is and never tries to hide it, it challenged him to look himself in the mirror and acknowledge the mask he was wearing. It's therefore only because he couldn't rise up to the challenge that he stopped being able to be openly emotional and experience the relief that came with it. Instead, he completely slingshotted the other way and dove headfirst into violence, action, and masculinity. On the surface, that might seem like it makes him powerful and strong, but it was actually the weak thing to do. Because, as I've said in another video, anyone can be violent, cold, or destructive, but it takes strength to be vulnerable. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to argue that men have to be just as emotional as women, or that they have to completely ignore their masculine side to be healthy members of society and to feel happy, because again, I believe that taking anything to the extreme is unhealthy. Remember how I said that in general, I agree that Bob's praise for Fight Club illustrates the transformative impact of addressing repressed needs through action? Well, this is exactly where that argument comes in. I agree that men, like I said earlier in the video, need to act on their natural impulses, but this doesn't mean that violence, brutality, destruction, and anarchy all automatically get a green light. No, what it means is that men have to find a healthy outlet for their emotions that works for them. For example, if you find that you naturally have an excess of energy or that you're angry all the time, whether man or woman, the solution isn't to go out and cause mayhem or to beat someone up, because that wouldn't be beneficial to all parties involved. Instead, the solution might be to join a boxing class, preferably one that's well regulated and controlled and isn't led by a power-hungry tyrant. It might alternatively be going out for a run or simply just writing it out or letting yourself cry, since anger is usually a masking emotion anyway. The point is, we're all human, and that means that we're dynamic. We can't be placed in a box, because a label that fit in the past will very likely stop being a fit in the future. In the same way, a tool that used to work for you will very likely stop working for you in the future. That doesn't mean that that tool is useless, it simply means it's inappropriate for you in this situation at this time. Similarly, Jack learning to meditate and Bob learning to cry wasn't useless, it's just that these were limited solutions that weren't necessarily appropriate for all the baggage they were carrying. Ultimately, I think the point of Fight Club is this. When you're paralyzed and stuck in life like Jack, you have two options. Let yourself feel or act. Tyler got Jack to act, but only Marla could get him to be authentic and vulnerable.
I'm trying to tell you that I'm sorry. Because what I've come to realize is that I really like you, Marla.
This is why I think it's so important that the ending of the movie involved not only Jack permanently ending Tyler's influence on him, but also him reaching out and grabbing Marla's hand. This is meant to show that he's finally opening up to his more feminine side, while at the same time consciously distancing himself from any toxic masculinity that may still be latent within him. That's why, even though I find it understandable that Fight Club is often interpreted as a movie that promotes violence, masculinity, aggression, and anarchy, I also think this interpretation completely misses the point. Because when you actually listen to the dialogue, when you actually analyze the characters and explore what they represent, when you actually consider all three acts equally instead of giving the most weight to the first two, then it's clear that Fight Club was satire that everyone took too seriously. I know you might struggle to believe that, so I want to invite you to leave a comment down below with your thoughts. One of the things I really appreciate about Fight Club is that it has layers on layers on layers, so I could have very well missed something. In either case, I'm open to having a discussion about it. As for right now though, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.